Welcome to episode 13 of the Pentest Plus training series, and we are continuing on with our vulnerability module. And in this particular video, we're going to finalize it. We're going to wrap it up, and we're going to be talking about the tools for vulnerability discovery. And all of these tools will, actually, I want to say most of these tools will be used inside of the practical section of this training series when we actually start running some scans and doing a bunch of vulnerability analysis and reconnaissance and enumeration and all of that good stuff. And you will need to get access to them. If you're going to download them directly onto your own computer, that's definitely one option. The option that I'm going to take is to just get Kali Linux installed on a USB drive. I actually have it already installed, and I'm just going to be getting a more recent version of Kali Linux to make sure all the patches and everything are already applied to it. And we get that from Kali's website directly, and you can install it on a USB drive and run it basically from any computer instead of having to download it directly and install it on the hard drive of your computer. The instructions for that are inside of the CompTIA Linux Plus playlist inside the first episode, or the first video, I should say. In the first video in section 3, we go through installations, and I go through what it's like to install it on a USB drive as well as what it's like to install it on your computer. And if you do that, if you download Kali Linux and install that, most, if not all of these tools are already going to be pre-installed on Kali Linux, so you don't have to worry about installing them on your own computer, so on and so forth. So that is the recommended approach to this, but of course you're more than welcome to just download them individually and run them as your use case requires, because a lot of times you don't need all of the things. You just need maybe a handful of the tools. So that I'll leave that part up to you. In this section, or in this video, we're just going to go through these various tools that are relevant to pen testing and the CompTIA PenTest Plus examination. We're going to talk about where you can get them. We're going to talk about what the tools do. I'll give you a brief use case for each one, and then when we finally get to the practical section of this training series, the practical videos, we're going to be using all of these things in depth, and you're going to get a really good experience level with them. You're going to use them a lot, and you will get very well versed with them, and hopefully you will learn to love them the way that I love them. So a quick read through: vulnerability discovery tools automate the process of identifying security weaknesses on applications, on networks, on containers and cloud environments, systems, anything like that. These tools help penetration testers, red teamers, and security analysts efficiently detect vulnerabilities before attackers can exploit them. And we're going to be talking about web and network vulnerability scanners like Nikto, OpenVAS, and Nessus. We're going to talk about code and secret scanners like TruffleHog and PowerSploit, and Active Directory privilege escalation with BloodHound, and container and cloud security scanners like Grype, Trivy, and Kube-Hunter. And we've referenced these already a little bit, but we're just going to be talking about them specifically in this particular video. I'm going to show you where you can get them. And again, I've gone through most of this stuff, so this might be repetitive if you've been keeping up with this training series as a whole, and if you've been watching all of the episodes. Some of these things might be repetitive, some of them are not, because we haven't talked about them. But for the most part, I just want you to be aware of them. I want you to get another chance to see a little bit of examples of what their use cases might be, and then when we actually get to the practical portion of this training series, you will be using them in depth. So to get the PenTest Plus notes, practice questions, and to join a supportive community of like-minded people like you, consider joining the Hackaholics Anonymous membership community. We have 4 tiers: the supporter, the agent, the guardian, and the master. And each tier gets their own Discord server and early access to content. The agent, guardian, and master levels will get exclusive content like line-by-line code explanations for how to create cybersecurity and PenTest Plus scripts, like exclusive downloads that they will get. For example, the notes document for this PenTest Plus and everything that I'm using for the lectures, as well as all of the practice questions and everything else that will go along that will be made for the scripts and everything else that we're going to be doing for the PenTest Plus training series. There will be free pre-made monthly Python automations that have to do with system administration, cybersecurity defense, as well as, of course, PenTest Plus and ethical hacking. And then there's going to be monthly live streams with me every single month, plus so many other things that you would get as a part of being a member of Hackaholics Anonymous in these tiers. To join, you can simply click the link in the description below, or you can go to our homepage and click the join button there. Or you can go to youtube.com/@hankhackshackers/join, and you'll be able to join Hackaholics Anonymous. Now, without further ado, let us continue with PenTest Plus. Our first web and network scanner is Nikto, and I've used Nikto in previous pen testing job applications and a lot of different exercises, and it's a very useful tool. It's an open source web server scanner that detects misconfigurations, outdated software, and security vulnerabilities, and it's a command line tool. So what it can do is it can detect outdated server versions that actually have known vulnerabilities, and it'll detect security header misconfigurations. So for example, the missing X-frame option header, which can also be another security vulnerability. And common web application flaws, for example, insecure directories or default files, and a lot of really other cool stuff as well. Nikto is actually very useful, and it does a lot of things within one tool, and this is one of the reasons why it is one of the most recommended tools when it comes down to web and network scanning, mainly because of the fact it's kind of like an industry standard. It's like a very popular tool because of the fact that it has so many functionalities and it can do so much for an open source tool. That's the other part of it, is that because it's actually free to download and install, it ends up being one of those tools that you gotta have inside of your arsenal. The example scan is as such. So basically, this is how you run it inside of your terminal. Very, very simple and very straightforward. So Nikto, the -H for the host that you want to scan, and then you give it the domain name or the IP address. And then I typically do -V as well to just get a verbose output. But for the most part, that's pretty much it. It'll scan for common web vulnerabilities on target.com, which is going to be the target in this particular case. And so we can scan web applications for vulnerabilities. We can check SSL TLS configurations for security issues, and a large variety of other things that are pretty inherent, pretty included. What's the native? Native is the word. They're pretty native to Nikto. To download Nikto, you can go to the cert.net website, so cirt.net/Nikto2, which is the most recent version of it. I usually do download Nikto or download whatever the name of the tool is, just so I can get the link to the most recent version of it. And so Nikto 2.5 is the most recent version, and this is another one of the reasons why I want to get an updated installation of Kali Linux, because I want the most updated version of the tools that come pre-installed with Kali Linux. So Nikto 2.5, the install latest GitHub release, which is a zip folder. You can get it directly from a GitHub repository, and is sponsored by NetSparker, etc., etc., etc. There's a lot of great features that are listed in it in case you're curious. And of course, there's documentation that is available. So if you go to the Nikto docs folder, it'll take you directly to the GitHub repository. And again, this is another one of those things that you can just get directly from GitHub, which makes it super powerful and very, very freaking handy. And it's available at the sullo/Nikto. So SULLO/Nikto. And then the wiki, which is the documentation, is where all of these things are included. So introduction, installation, usage, command line options, plugins, configuration files, outputs, test writing, code writing, troubleshooting, etc. There's a lot of good information on Nikto, mainly because of the fact that, again, it's like a really popular tool. And so the community requests a lot of revisions from it, and the community feeds into the revisions. They contribute to make sure that Nikto is up to par and updated and fully functional. So you can get Nikto either from GitHub directly, or you can just navigate yourself from the cert.net website, and then that'll take you to the GitHub repository, which we were just at. So this is the actual homepage of the GitHub repository for Nikto to be able to download it, and then you can clone it, install it on your machine, etc., etc. But again, my recommendation is always to just get Kali Linux, because a lot of these things come pre-installed with Kali Linux. Let's move on to our next one. OpenVAS, also known as the Open Vulnerability Assessment Scanner. And this is an open source, like the name implies, vulnerability scanner for network and application security assessments. and it scans for CVEs, the common vulnerabilities and exposures, and it pulls up the CVE IDs if it finds it from the CVE database for NIST, and it'll scan it in operating systems, it'll scan it in services, it'll scan it in web applications, IP addresses, and it performs authenticated and unauthenticated scans, which is actually really freaking handy, and it automates vulnerability assessments with detailed reports. So there's a command line version of this, and there's also a GUI, a graphical user interface for this that you can go to your web browser and access, and then you'll run the scan, and then from there you can generate a report, and it'll generate a really cool report for you in PDF format, and then you can distribute the report to people inside of your company, or use the report for further reconnaissance or vulnerability assessments. You can use the report to create exploits when you get to your exploitation phase. So this is a very cool tool, very useful tool. I've used it a lot, and they were actually teaching about it in the cybersecurity analyst, the CompTIA CYSA course that I was taking at the very, very beginning of this when I got started. They taught about it. We got a chance to use it. Very user friendly, especially when you use the graphical interface, and also very functional. It can actually get a lot of really good data for you. And the report side of it is also very, very useful. Believe it or not, reporting is actually a big deal. And when a tool creates a report for you, it makes your life so much easier. These are the commands that you would use to set it up and to actually synchronize it and update its database, because the databases constantly get updated. The CVE databases get updated. So you want an up-to-date database of vulnerabilities so that whenever you run the scan, you can actually get something that maybe it was like a recent vulnerability that was exploited, or a vulnerability that was found on your server or on your web application. So these would be the series of commands that you would run. So these are one by one, you would run them. And then this sets up OpenVAS, and then it updates its vulnerability database for you. And the use cases would be to literally do vulnerability scanning on an enterprise level, because you can actually scan a subnet of IP addresses. And you can do compliance checks for payment card industry standard, PCI, right? So if you're collecting card information like credit card or debit card information, you have to comply with those compliances. And of course, the ISO 27001, the HIPAA compliance requirements, the regulatory environments for health companies or hospitals, or if you deal with any kind of health information, so the Health Information Portability Accountability Act. So these are compliance checks that can be adhered to, right? Or you can audit your systems against those various compliance requirements based on the CVEs, right? So if you actually have any kind of a common vulnerability that is inside of your environment, that will be connected to any potential compliance requirements that you would have to adhere to. So that is just a few of the things that OpenVAS can do. So let's look at where we will get it. OpenVAS is actually one of the tools that is not pre-installed on Kali Linux, but it is available as a package with the Kali Linux depository or repository, that you'd be able to use using apt, the package manager, APT, the package manager that's inside of Kali Linux. You can get OpenVAS from their website directly, which is a Greenbone product. So openvas.org is from Greenbone, and you can just go to it. You can get the source code if you wanted to. You can just click on products, and when you do, you will get to the greenbone.net website. I'm going to decline these cookies here, and then from here we can go ahead and get access to OpenVAS. So if we actually go to, let's see where we can find the products themselves right here, boom, and then hardware appliances, Greenbone Enterprise, Virtual Appliances, Greenbone OpenVAS Report, Greenbone Basic, etc., etc. So we want to install OpenVAS. So I guess it's not from the OpenVAS or the products link. I don't think it's from the products link. I think we might be getting it directly from any of these different locations. So let's see. Okay, so after clicking around their website a little bit, the install is actually from the GitHub repository. So if you go to greenbone/openvas-scanner is where you will land, and you will get the GitHub repository to be able to download and install OpenVAS scanner. So this was not that easy to find. It's their website was kind of difficult to navigate. So just save yourself the time and energy. You don't need to go through the Greenbone website. Just go to github.com /greenbone/openvas-scanner, and you'll be able to land here, and then you can go ahead and just clone the repository and install it. Moving on to our next tool, which is going to be Nessus. Now, Nessus is a commercial vulnerability scanner, meaning this is paid, and it's actually kind of expensive. And it's very popular still because it's actually very, very powerful, and it does a lot of really good work. It's used in penetration testing and compliance assessments because it will give you a really solid report. It'll give you an outline of all of the vulnerabilities that it finds, and it'll rank them for you to let you know whether or not they need to be addressed right away, etc., etc. So it can identify misconfigurations, missing patches, and outdated software. It supports authenticated scanning, and of course provides compliance-based security checks as well. And this is the counterpart to OpenVAS, the paid version, the paid counterpart to OpenVAS. And it's very, very functional, very, very in-depth, sophisticated. It does a lot of really good things. It does work faster as well compared to OpenVAS. And it's just the paid version, right? I can't even call it the paid version because it's a different company and it's sourced from a different location, but it does what OpenVAS also does. It just does it better, stronger, faster. Nessus has both a command line version as well as a GUI, a graphical interface, to run a basic scan against a given target. You would just call upon it. You can run it in quiet mode. The target itself would be Nessus _scan.nessus, for example. The output would be put into this TXT file for you, assuming that you want to get the output in a TXT format. So that full command that you see right here will just run a basic scan against whoever the target is, and it'll output the results into the TXT file for you. It can scan large enterprise networks for vulnerabilities, so multiple subnets, for example, verifying security patches and compliance policies, as we've already discussed. And let's get the installation for this one. First, just to give you an idea of the price for this, is the professional version of Nessus, right? So literally, it's thousands, right? So it's 4,390 USD for 1 year. For 2 years, it's 85.60, which ends up saving you $219. For 3 years, it's 12,000, and it saves you $658. And you know, it does sound like a lot of money, but you got to consider that this is an enterprise product, and so companies that are doing millions, if not billions of dollars in revenue will be buying something like this and then giving access to it for one of their pen testers or vulnerability people or their security engineers, something along those lines. So this is not being paid for by an individual unless the individual is doing really well in their business, right? And they have a large enough network. This is supporting an enterprise network that covers thousands of devices, if not tens of thousands of devices. So it's a very, very strong product. And this does the things that OpenVAS cannot do because it works for really, really large enterprise environments. So this is the pricing of it. Now, to install it, I always, again, just start with Google. And so install Nessus will bring us to the installing of Tenable Nessus link, and then from here we actually go to these various links that are available, so you can install it for Linux, Windows, Mac OS, Raspberry Pi even, and you can install it as a Docker image. So if we click on Windows, for example, it'll just take you to the installation process for Windows or any of the other ones, Linux, Mac OS, etc., and it'll take you through those installations. Now, depending on the version or the distribution of Linux that you run, it may be different what the instructions would be, what the command line instructions would be, and depending on the version of Windows or Mac, it might be, you might have different set of instructions as well. But for the most part, Windows and Mac are kind of the most user-friendly when it comes down to installing things, because you just get an install file. When you're dealing with Linux, a lot of times you're dealing with a version of Linux that is command line only, and you don't get a graphical interface. And so if you don't get a graphical interface, then you will have to use it via the command line, and depending on the version of Linux that you're running, right? So this is Debian, Kali, and Ubuntu, and then FreeBSD, there's Red Hat Linux, etc. So depending on what it is, you would be running some kind of a command line to argument or a command line command to actually install the thing, and that will get it installed for you, and then you can go ahead through the rest of the documentation, installation instructions to actually get it installed. But don't get any of these things. This is kind of, I forgot to mention this at the very top. You don't want to get this from third-party resources, right? The only third-party location that you would want to get something from is GitHub. But apart from that, you need to get it directly from their company, and the instructions and install files should be received from their company website, which in this particular case for Nessus is Tenable. So tenable.com. If you're not getting it from tenable.com, please don't download it from anywhere else, right? It's only from tenable.com, or go through the package manager for Kali Linux and then run the command, and then it'll download it directly from its repository, or you would go to GitHub, something along those lines. Don't get it from Pirate Bay or some crazy thing like that just because you're like, oh, I want to get a version of this and I don't want to pay for it because it's $5,000 a year, so I'm going to download it from Pirate Bay. Don't do that, because you're most likely going to download a corrupt version of it and you will install malware and ransomware on your computer. So be warned, okay? Please don't download these things. Just use an open source software instead of trying to download a free version of a paid software. Just do that. Save yourself the headache, the time, energy, money, all of that stuff, right? So moving on to our next one. The concept of a secret scanner or a code scanner is very, very popular, and it's becoming more and more popular as we get further into the development age. And TruffleHog is one of those really cool tools that actually allows you to scan for secrets, right? Quote unquote secrets. So an API key, for example, is considered a secret because it gives you access to a platform or some kind of a tool or some kind of a API accessible security appliance, whatever it is, right? Passwords are considered to be secrets, and secrets in code repositories, any of these things that could potentially be used to impersonate someone or to get access to something that you shouldn't have access to, that is considered to be a secret. We're not talking about, it could be like a secret recipe. That could be a secret that's available for a company. It's called intellectual property, etc. But that's not what we're talking about when we're talking about a secret scanner. We're talking about API keys that we can use, or passwords, or other types of secret codes that would exist, tokens or something like that, that would exist inside of source code that you want to scan to see if you can get any useful information out of. So that's what a tool like TruffleHog will actually do for you. So it'll scan Git repositories, it'll scan Amazon S3 buckets, it'll scan file systems for any kind of sensitive data. It can detect high entropy strings that resemble API keys or encryption keys, and it'll get that to you, and that could be something again that you can use to pass the hash, or you could log into somebody's website, or log into their portals using an API key that was specifically assigned to a person. Therefore, you now can kind of impersonate them. API keys are used for obviously programming integration. So when you want to connect, for example, Wazoo, the security appliance, with ChatGPT API or with Google Gemini API, something like that, right? These are the types of keys that first you would get an API key from OpenAI or from Google, and then that would be connected to your source code that would then connect you to Wazoo, etc. And so when you do all of that, if your API key is not obfuscated, or if it's not encrypted or hidden, then what's going to happen is somebody who may get access to that source code can find your API key and then use your account, and now you have to pay for what they're doing, or they can do malicious things using your API key. And if it's ever, if there's an investigation or anything that's done, it gets tracked back to your API key, and then you get in trouble for it, and now you have to deal with that kind of a headache. So these are the reasons why these things are considered to be secrets, because they track back, they trace back to whoever the original creator of that API key was, whoever that owner of that API key was. And if somebody uses it maliciously, those things get tracked back to you, and now you have to answer for them, right? So these are the reasons why we want to obfuscate these things. We want to maybe not even have it embedded in the source code, right? It's like provide a different means of inserting your API key when your API key is necessary, so that you don't actually include it in the source code and people can't take advantage of it. As always, this is a sample command for TruffleHog. So we're going to turn on the regex pattern because we want to search for those. And then we're going to turn on entropy. And then this is the source, or the target technically, that you would be scanning. So you'd be scanning that GitHub repository to see if you can find any kind of hard-coded credentials in it, right? And the use cases would be to find exposed API keys, data passwords, or database passwords, SSH keys, a variety of other types of secrets that can actually be found. And scanning for these things before deploying code to production is very important, right? So this is not just for the context of penetration testing. Keep this in mind. It's like pen testing is the end goal for pen testing is to secure your environment, to secure your application. And so when you scan for something on an application before you submit it to production so that real live users can start using it, one of the big things that you want to do is scan that code for secrets or anything that could potentially be used maliciously by an end user that is studying hacking, and now they want to do those things, and all of a sudden they find your API key, and now they get a smart idea, right? And then they go ahead and try to manipulate your API key or whatever, like whatever the secret might be. Whatever those things are, you don't want them to be included in the source code before your actual application is deployed out into the real world. So this is one of the big reasons why we would use a tool like this, even if we're not officially doing a black box pen test or whatever. We would run this specific tool against source code just to make sure that there are no secrets in the source code before we deploy it to production for end users to use it. To install TruffleHog, we would go through the GitHub repo for it, and it's available through the Truffle Security repo, the Truffle Security company, I should say. So Truffle Security /TruffleHog is where you would find it, and of course you would be able to get the clone of it, install it. There's a bunch of documentation that's available for it on how to use it, and here we can even see a little demo command that's being ran, and then what the output might be. And of course, we just saw, I think it was like an API key or something that was found. So there we go. Raw result is this key from the AWS. There's just a lot, right? This is very, very cool little tool that can be used. And then you can get installation for Mac OS, for Docker, for binary releases on Windows PowerShell, command prompt, etc. There's a lot of different ways that you can get TruffleHog installed. And we can even check to see if TruffleHog comes pre-installed on Linux. So let's see that pre-installed on Kali Linux. I think it's not. Yeah, so TruffleHog is not pre-installed on Kali Linux. While Kali Linux comes with a vast array of penetration testing tools, TruffleHog is not one of them. And you can do apt install TruffleHog, and then you'll be able to install it on your Kali Linux machine. Or you can go through, of course, the GitHub repository, as you just saw, to be able to get access to it. The next one is PowerSploit, and this is a PowerShell-based penetration testing framework for post-exploitation, privilege escalation, and network reconnaissance. So I thought that it was actually kind of a part of the Metasploit suite of tools, but I think it's because it's PowerShell-based that's where that part comes from, and then it's not a PowerSploit as in connection to Metasploit. It's just PowerShell exploitation, right? PowerShell, so Power S right here, right? You could see that, and then now it's an exploitation tool. So penetration testing framework for post-exploitation, privilege escalation, and network reconnaissance. Being that PowerShell is a Windows-based language or a Windows-based series of binaries, then we can rest assured that this is not going to be included in Kali Linux. Therefore, we're not going to run it when we're doing our practical examination part of this, as we do the practical exercises. It's just something that is important enough for you to know and be aware of, and what it actually does, right? So it executes the in-memory payloads to bypass traditional antivirus detection, and it supports network enumeration, user credential extraction, and persistence mechanisms. So it's a pen testing framework, right? And it does post-exploitation, privilege escalation, and network reconnaissance. And it's technically a part of our vulnerability analysis suite of tools, because a lot of this information can actually be used for vulnerability analysis and creating exploitation or exploits, payloads, things like that. So this is a Windows-based tool that supports those goals. Now, if you're familiar with PowerShell at all, then you kind of understand the pattern behind PowerShell commands. So there's always a verb, and then there's the noun that is referencing. So in this particular case, it's invoking, right? So invoke Mimikatz. If you're not familiar with Mimikatz, Mimikatz is a very powerful tool that is used for credential dumping, right? To try to find credentials on any given computer. And so you would invoke Mimikatz, and then you would use the dump creds option that will extract the cached or cached credentials from Windows systems. You can have Mimikatz installed by itself as just kind of a standalone installation, but when you use PowerSploit, because it's a framework and it has access to a variety of different tools, Mimikatz would come pre-installed with it. Therefore, you can go ahead and invoke Mimikatz from PowerSploit and then use the dump creds option inside of Mimikatz to go ahead and potentially get whatever cached credentials exist inside of that system. So we can use it for Windows privilege escalation and credential theft. We can use it to bypass endpoint security for advanced red team operations. These types of operations are done further along on the pen testing pathway, right? So when you have gone through an exercise, you have most likely gotten into a system already, and now you're trying to get further credentials and you're trying to escalate your privileges. When you want to do those types of things, you would invoke these types of strategies and use these types of tools to hopefully get, escalated privileges or escalated credentials and bypass endpoint security, etc., etc. So there's no surprise as to where we can get it. Obviously, it's available through GitHub, the GitHub repository, PowerShell Mafia, PowerSploit. It's also available for Kali Linux, which is actually very useful so that you can potentially run it. And I just found out that it's available for Kali Linux literally in real life, in live real time, I should say. In real time, I found out that we can use it on Kali Linux. So I just might try to use it on the Kali Linux machine that we're going to use in our practicals. The PowerSploit is available through PowerShell Mafia /PowerSploit. And just like everything else in GitHub, it has all the installation files and the cloned repository. And then the project is no longer supported. So it's a collection of Microsoft PowerShell modules that can be used to aid pen testers, etc. But it seems that it's no longer supported. I feel like that means that it's not being updated anymore. And if that's indeed the case, it might not be the best tool that we would end up using for our intended purposes, because there are other tools that can be used for post-exploitation. So it may not necessarily be the best tool because, it says it's not being supported, and that usually means that they stopped updating it and stopped patching it and all of those things. So we could be using an outdated version. Therefore, we could be setting ourselves up for potential failure. So instead of doing that, we can always just use Mimikatz directly, right? So Mimikatz 2.0 in memory is what it would be calling. So just as a check, right? So what is the most recent version of Mimikatz is what we can check. And the most recent version is 2.2, right? So the current version of GitHub is being 2.2, and that's at the time of, April 7, 2025. And so if we go to ParrotSec and look at Mimikatz, the most recent version, as we can see, is Mimikatz 2.0 is what it says over here, but it said 2.2 in that description. So that's the thing that is a little bit confusing for me, because I want to find out what the most recent version of this thing is. Now, on the ParrotSec website for Mimikatz, the last commitment on here was 5 years ago, and it does say 2.2. So you can see right here, version 2.2, 2.2, etc. So I don't know if that means 2.2.0, which is what this thing is reading right here, right? Because it says Mimikatz 2.0 alpha. So I don't know if that's what that means, but it feels like it should be 2.2 is the most recent version, which this is kind of a little bit confusing. Just to be safe, I'm going to say that we don't use PowerSploit. mainly because of the fact that there's just this note at the top right here that says this project is no longer supported, and I don't want to use an outdated tool. So 9 years ago, 8 years ago are the PowerSploit PSD scripts. So these seem to be pretty outdated. The README file was updated 5 years ago, but the overall project seems to be as old as 8 years. And with some of the things, so reconnaissance, the swapped default Kerber roasting output formats was updated 7 years ago. 7 years is a very, very long time when you really consider what can be done inside of technology, especially in the age of AI with all the things that are updating every 3 months or every 6 months. 7 years is a very long time. So it's something of note because it was mentioned inside of the CompTIA PenTest Plus outline for the examination. So I think it's important for us to know what PowerShell is and what it does. I just don't know if it's the best tool to use when we get into our practical section. So, fair warning, be warned, approach this, tread softly, as they say. But just wanted you to know that it actually exists, what it does, so that when we run across questions for it, we know if we see it in our list of answers, we can kind of guesstimate what it is that we're supposed to be answering. And at the very least, we have a general understanding of what this tool does. Moving on to Active Directory and privilege escalation. Active Directory is native to Windows-based machines, and privilege escalation pretty much applies to any kind of system or any kind of environment where there are multiple privileges. So that's not necessarily just native to Windows, but Active Directory is. So BloodHound is the tool that's a graph-based tool for Active Directory attack path analysis. So it actually looks at Active Directory paths or attacking Active Directory via multiple vectors. And so it identifies privilege escalation paths within the AD environment and maps attack paths from low privileged users to domain admin. So if you can think about, entering the network as a low privileged user, but still being able to run BloodHound, and then it gives you a path of, okay, you can jump from the current user that you're on to this next user, to that user, to that user, to that user, and then finally you will end up as a domain admin. That's very, very freaking powerful. It's like a very useful tool, and honestly, I'm super excited about this kind of a tool. Even though we're not going to be using it inside of a Windows environment, it is something that I'm just super freaking excited about. And maybe what we can do is we can use, Metasploit and Metasploitable to run our hacking exercises. And if possible, we can run Metasploitable and see if we can do it as a Windows machine, maybe. I'm not exactly sure yet. And if we can, then we can go ahead and use BloodHound, because if it is a Windows-based machine, then we can definitely try to find a path to escalate our privileges from Active Directory. And that would be freaking cool, let me tell you. It just gets me hyped, the fact that something like this even exists. The use case for BloodHound is actually very simple. So you just call on the executable, which in this case, I guess is called sharphound.exe. So you just call on the executable, and then you give it the option to run everything, to check everything. And so it'll collect Active Directory enumeration data for analysis, and it'll try to identify misconfigurations in Active Directory permissions, and it'll try to find exploitable attack paths to gain domain admin access, which is, again, very, very useful. If it can do it, and if it can actually provide a path for you to go from a low-level user all the way to a domain administrator, it's probably the most useful tool that can be used inside of post-exploitation and further reconnaissance, and then privilege escalation or vertical movement, right? So we have lateral movement and we have vertical movement. And if this gives you the path to gain domain admin access, it's the most powerful tool that I have heard of. No bullshit, because everything else that exists is useful and it's very powerful, but this just by itself is like the tool that tells you, okay, go after this user and then this user and then this user. And I may be over explaining this. I may be like explaining it to death kind of a thing, but it's just because I find it to be so freaking cool. So anyways, let's see where we can find this thing. Let's see where we can download this thing. Okay, it's very exciting that we can actually see a Kali Linux from kali.org under their tools for BloodHound, and it uses graph theory to reveal hidden and often unintended relationships with an Active Directory environment. Very freaking cool. So it does exist in the Kali world. You can get it directly from their GitHub repository for Spectre Ops and the BloodHound Legacy. So Spectre Ops / BloodHound Legacy is where you can find it. You can clone it, install it, and so the version 4 has been deprecated. This repository in version 4, which was last updated in 2023, is no longer maintained. It will be archived in the near future. That is really unfortunate because I think this is such a cool freaking tool. But for the most part, you can get it directly from GitHub. Let's go see what the Kali Linux link will actually do for us, because this is super exciting as well. So this is on the AMD ARM64, so AMD 64, ARM64 architectures. What's the date on this page? That's something that I'm very, very curious about. Updated on May 30th, 2025. So this is actually fairly recent, and it can be installed via running the command line tools for APT, the package manager, and then you would actually go through the setup and you do the installation, and then you can use your web browser to access the graphical user interface, and it will most likely, hopefully, give you some really interesting tools here. So let's see what the final result might be. So this is what it looks like. You actually get in, packages and binaries, run it, help menu, setup, etc. Oh, it doesn't give us what the potential would be, right? So it's available. Let's see. So, oh, there we go. So starting this thing, it's not running. Directories in use are here. Starting Neo4j, available at so on and so forth. You need to change the default password for this. Default credentials are this, etc. This is interesting. This is the BloodHound setup. So never mind. This is the help menu for BloodHound setup. It's not actually showing us the full use case of what it would look like if we were to run it. And this image right here is also, I don't think, implying that we were running it, although it does say that it's running in the background, and now you actually get to go into here and just set up your password. So this is not something, this is not something that's going to show us exactly how to run it. It's just showing us how to install it. And if we click on the home page, I think it'll take us, it takes us to the GitHub repository. So I'm just overly excited about this tool. This is something that I'm super excited about. And this is not the deprecated version. So this is actually different. So Spectre Ops BloodHound, how is this different from that other link that we got? Because the other one that we got is the deprecated version from what it seems like. BloodHound Legacy. Yeah, so this is the BloodHound Legacy version. And this is not the version that you want. You want to go to Spectre Ops and you want to go to just BloodHound. And that'll take you to the most recent version of BloodHound. So, okay, this is actually very exciting. So this is something that I'm super, super excited about, because I thought this was also like an outdated tool, but this is not an outdated tool. It has the documentation link over here that will take you to their Spectre Ops website, and then you can get all the information that you would need to run it, install it, test it, all of that good stuff. So I'm really happy that there is officially an actual version of this that is not the legacy version that we can just find from their GitHub. Which then brings us to container and cloud security scanners. So if you can kind of notice, we've gone from the lowest level, right? The lowest level being like the base level, meaning the actual machine itself and the networks themselves, right? And then we keep coming up until we've now gotten to containers. And containers are not things that you download and install. You basically kind of run them from Docker, for example, or you would run them from a cloud environment that exists on somebody else's physical devices. It exists on somebody else's physical server, and you're kind of just getting access to the image of whatever the tool is that you want to use, right? And it doesn't require you to have the actual dependencies on your own computer, because you're pulling all of the dependencies from Docker, etc. So now we're looking at the highest level of an application or software that can be used. So container images being those things and cloud images being those things. So Grype is a tool that is used for vulnerability scanning for container images and file systems. So it scans Docker and Kubernetes containers for known vulnerabilities and exposures, and it supports multiple Linux distributions, Ubuntu, Alpine, and Debian, which is really, really awesome because we're going to be using Kali Linux, Ubuntu, which are kind of similar, or pretty much, I think, very similar to each other. They just have different software installed on them. So we will most likely end up using Grype, which is something that I'm actually very excited about. So Grype is the tool that is a vulnerability scanner for container and file system images. The example command is just calling on it and then giving it the path to the container image so that it can actually start scanning. So this will check the container image for security vulnerabilities, and it can be used to ensure container images are free from known vulnerabilities, which is pretty much the whole purpose of doing these vulnerability scans and doing any kind of a pen test, is to end up here from making sure that you have no known vulnerabilities, and then scanning software dependencies for common vulnerabilities and exposures. And software dependencies are, again, parts of those things that are imported from Docker images or from Kubernetes, which come as a whole package, right? So when you install a software, sometimes it needs a dependency to be able to do what it's supposed to do, and you want to be able to also scan those dependencies to make sure that there's no vulnerabilities in those things. It's not just the actual software that you want to scan, but also everything else that the software calls on, everything else that it uses to do what it's supposed to do. So you want to make sure that all of those dependencies, all of those requirements are also free of these vulnerabilities and exposures. So let's see how we can get access to Grype. I want to say, if I were to venture a guess, I want to say that this comes pre-installed on Kali Linux. So let's see if it does, and if not, let's see where we can get it. Okay, so I stand corrected. Grype is not typically pre-installed with Kali Linux, and we would need to get it directly by either running curl or sudo snap install, etc. Or you can obviously come to the GitHub repo and get it from here. So let's see if this thing is up to date. There are no notes that make it seem like that this has been predicated or outdated. So it's a vulnerability scanner for container images and file systems. I really love this logo. This is like probably one of my favorite logos of all time. It easily installs the binary and you can try it out, and we have some example use cases that we can see right here. We have the features that we can run right here, the installation instructions, etc. So this is a very, very long README section, but it's probably because of the fact that this actually can do a lot of things. So I'm excited about Grype. This is a very cool tool, and it's something that we can use to scan Kubernetes as well as Docker images and their dependencies and everything like this. And as we go further into cloud computing, as we go further into not relying on physical hardware to be inside of our locations and then having to scan that physical hardware, we go more into a cloud environment and Docker environments. And so tools like Grype are very, very handy, and they're very important. And this is most likely going to be something that if you're going to work in a cloud type of an environment, you need to know about this tool so that you can go ahead and run it and try to find information about vulnerabilities and things like that for your Docker images and all of its dependencies. The next one is Trivy, and so this is another container security scanner that detects vulnerabilities in operating system packages and application dependencies. This quickly vulnerability assessments on container images, vulnerability libraries, the software packages, and misconfigurations, all of the things that it pretty much Grype can also do. I think this is just another option in case you, for whatever reason, don't like Grype. And it's always good to run multiple tools against the same system anyway, just because the functionality of one may not be the same as the other one. And so when you run both of them, you may actually get more comprehensive information instead of just, okay, this one's going to get you exactly what the last one got you. This one might get you something that Grype missed, or vice versa, right? Grype might get you something that Trivy missed. The example command is very similar to the other one with Grype, except we actually have to declare that we want to scan an image here. So Trivy image, and then give it the my Docker image. So it scans it for known vulnerabilities. We can use it to secure Docker and Kubernetes environments before we deploy them. We can also use it to detect supply chain security risks in CI/CD, continuous integration. I want to say continuous integration, continuous development or deployment pipelines. So very, very important use case, again, because you want to make sure everything is secure before it's actually deployed to the world or before you use it yourself, right? So there are a lot of different reasons why we do these things, but ultimately they all end up in the same place because we want to secure them before we use them or before we give access to other people to use them. So let's see where we can find Trivy. Trivy is also not pre-installed on Kali Linux, so therefore you can get it from the kali.org tools location, and this is what it looks like. And of course they give you installation instructions, or you can get it from the GitHub repository for installation of Trivy. And this one actually, interestingly enough, takes us to trivy.dev website, and that will give us instructions pretty much very similar to what you would get on GitHub, but this one is directly from their website, which is actually kind of nice. So if we do Debian Ubuntu, for example, it'll take us to the installation, so adding the repository to this location and then install, etc., or do a wget, which brings us from, basically it takes us to the actual GitHub location for Trivy, which is the path itself. So this is the path for the GitHub repository. It's aquasecurity/Trivy is where you would get it, and of course all of the instructions are here, all the documentation is here, etc., etc. They also just have their own website, which is the trivy.dev location that gives you all of the instructions to install it. So aquasecurity.github.io is the one that I clicked on, but what happens is that github.io is different from github.com, and github.io provides developers kind of like an interface to display their stuff. So this is a really good one as well. So if we actually search for CyberChef, CyberChef is also something that exists on github.io, not github.com. And so when we actually click on this, it'll take us to a GUI, a graphical user interface page that allows us to interact with CyberChef. So this is very different from what you see from github.com, right? Because github.com is basically just a bunch of, it's like a big file system, right? And then you get all of these things that will be downloaded when you clone the repository, and then there's the installation instructions, whereas github.io gives you an interface where you can either interact with the tool that they've uploaded and created, or you know, a page essentially is what it's like, right? So they've created a page, and so this is a page that has all the installation instructions for Trivy itself, and you can go ahead and access it as such. So there are a few different ways that you can access Trivy, and directly from Kali Linux is typically my favorite way to do it. And of course, it gives you the installation instructions and all of that good stuff as well. And our last one is Kube-Hunter or Kube-Hunter, Kube-Hunter, however you want to pronounce it. This is a pen testing tool for Kubernetes specific clusters. And it finds misconfigurations in Kubernetes clusters. It identifies exposed Kubernetes dashboard interfaces, which is actually very, very useful. It detects privilege escalation risks with containerized environments. So it's a vulnerability scanner, right? It's a pen testing tool for Kubernetes clusters, and it finds a bunch of different types of vulnerabilities for those types of clusters. Docker images are the equivalent of Kubernetes clusters. So just kind of, they are all held in the same conversation. And in this use case example, we can see just the command line that we ran. So Kube-Hunter, we gave it a remote option to scan this remote target cluster IP address, and it'll scan it for security misconfigurations. And we can ensure that the Kubernetes deployments are secure. We can identify exposed APIs and privilege escalation risks. So essentially a vulnerability scanning tool, right? It's just specific to Kubernetes clusters. So let's see where we can download this thing. Kube-Hunter is also by Aqua Security, which is very cool. And so of course, if you come to the Aqua Security GitHub repository and then go to /Kube-Hunter, you'll be brought here. And you can clone the repository, you can go through the documentation. These patterns for installation and understanding how to use these things are all very, very similar to each other, almost identical if you haven't been able to tell by now. So Kube-Hunter is accessible through the GitHub repository, and that's pretty much it. I'm not gonna beat a dead horse. I tend to over-explain things. I've noticed that. So I apologize if that annoys you, but I feel like it's better to over-explain than under-explain, to make sure that you actually have access to the information that you need. So that being said, we can now move into our practice questions for this section. Just like every other practice question that we've done for all of our PenTest Plus training series episodes, this is all going to be along the format of the PenTest examination itself. So in the PenTest examination, you're going to get multiple choice questions, you're going to get multiple response questions, and you're going to get performance-based questions. And the performance-based questions could be, okay, here's a scenario. It could be, all right, mix and match these options. It could be, here is the response to a command. What was the command that was ran? Or here is a command. What is the response that's going to be for this command? So it could be a variety of different things. In our slideshow that I'm going to share with you right now, you're going to get multiple choice, multiple response, and we're going to get scenario-based questions. Inside of this Google Doc that I'm using for this lecture and for every other episode that we've done and every episode that we're going to do, there are the scenario-based questions where there's like the mix and match stuff and other types of questions as well. And you can get access to both this document that I'm using for the lecture as well as the slideshow with the practice questions by joining Hackaholics Anonymous, which is our membership community. So if you join as an agent, guardian, or master, you'll be able to get access to all of the downloads for all of these CompTIA series trainings. And there are a lot of other exclusive downloads, and there's Python automations that are released every month. And there's a lot of great stuff that are given to those membership tiers. So if this is something that is interesting to you, I highly recommend you check out Hackaholics Anonymous, mainly because of the fact that it's like a fraction of a cost of what you would have to pay if you actually went to CompTIA to try to get their practice questions or to try to get their training videos or whatever it is. And the training videos you're getting for free through this training series. So if you're watching this, this was available to you for free on YouTube. So these are just some of the things that come as extra benefits, right, when you're a part of the Hackaholics Anonymous community, as well as just being a part of this channel right here, the community, the subscribers for Hank Hackerson. You know what I'm saying? So anyways, all of that being said, let's actually get into the practice questions themselves. Let's get into the slideshow. All right, tools for vulnerability discovery. Question number 1 is, which tool is primarily used to scan web servers for outdated software misconfigurations and common vulnerabilities? And so Wireshark is a network sniffer. So you basically capture network traffic and analyze it. It doesn't really do any kind of scanning for you. SQL Map is a scanner or a mapper, I guess we can say, for databases, for like relational databases, SQL databases. BloodHound was something that was used to map the path to Active Directory privilege escalation, right? So which users you can exploit to gain ultimate domain admin permissions. So the only one that's actually a scanning of web servers for outdated software vulnerabilities, etc., is Nikto. Very good. So which of the following are features commonly found in both OpenVAS and Nessus? So we got to select 2 here. The plugin-based vulnerability scanning architecture, CVE mapping and severity scoring. That's one for sure. Wireless packet injection support, code obfuscation detection. I know B is for sure an answer. Wireless packet injection support, not really, because OpenVAS and Nessus are vulnerability scanners. So this is definitely, I don't think this is even an option. So code obfuscation detection, I don't think it's an option either, because it's not doing anything with code. So CVE mapping, severity scoring, yes, for sure. Plugin-based vulnerability scanning. I see. So there you go. Vulnerability scanning. Because it's in the answer, I would say yeah, okay, there you go. A and B. Which of the following tools is best suited for scanning source code repositories for hard-coded secrets and credentials? So it's scanning source code repos for secrets and credentials. So it's secret scanner. SQL map again maps relational databases. Zap is a web application scanner that will scan web applications, and it will, provide a sitemap for you and things like that. Crack map execution, or crack map executor, I guess, is, I don't even know what that is. I don't think we even covered that. So that I can't imagine that would be the answer, although it might be. TruffleHog is one of the ones that I know for sure that actually scans for secrets and things like that. Okay, there you go, TruffleHog. So which capabilities are associated with PowerSploit? So remember, it does PowerShell exploitation, right? So PowerSploit is a framework that you can use on PowerShell to do a variety of different exploits. So it's a PowerShell-based exploitation and privilege escalation script. Yes, that's one of the answers. Capability to dump credentials from memory. Yeah, because that's what we did with Mimikatz. Web server fingerprinting. I think it can do that. I think actually it can actually do enumeration. And wireless signal jamming. This it cannot do. So that's for sure not an answer. The most obvious ones would be A and B, but I think it can still do fingerprinting. Yeah, so I want to say that it can also do enumeration from what I remember. But definitely the two most obvious answers would be A and B. What is the primary use of BloodHound in a penetration test? So it finds you a path to escalate privileges, right? So think of a BloodHound following tracks to finally get you that target. So discovering SQL injection flaws in web applications is not the answer. Mapping relationships and permissions in Active Directory environments, that's pretty solid. Yeah, because it's giving you the path to go from relationship to relationship and the permissions of those relationships to finally escalate those permissions for you. Brute forcing SSH login credentials, that is not what it does. And generating synthetic test traffic on a network is also not what it does. So mapping relationships and permissions, yes, excellent. Which of the following functions can BloodHound assist with? So now we're talking about BloodHound again. And so to identify privilege escalation paths, yes, we just talked about that. So we got to select 3. So that's definitely 1. Visualizing attack paths between domain users and admins, that's also yes. Highlighting users with unconstrained delegation rights, I guess, because it's technically looking at users and what their permissions are. So that could be a thing. Exploiting wireless protocols, that's not it. That's kind of like an aircrack, airmon kind of a function. Performing data exfiltration across segmented networks, that's also not it. So it would be A, B, and C. It has to be. Yeah, there you go. Which tool is used to scan container images for vulnerabilities in their software dependencies and OS packages? So it's scanning container images. So Nikto does web server scanning, right? Like websites and web servers and things like that. Nessus does vulnerability scanning in enterprise environments. Trivy definitely does scanning for container images. PowerSploit is the script for PowerShell. And I don't think you can use that in container images. The answer for sure, it has to be Trivy. Yeah, okay. Which of the following tools can be used for container and Kubernetes vulnerability discovery? So select 2. Grype is one of them. Kube-Hunter is another one. SQL map is mapping relational databases. Spiderfoot, I don't think I've even heard of that, so I don't know. I would say Grype and Kube-Hunter. Very good. Okay, so scenario, a pen tester is performing a security assessment of an internal Active Directory environment. They use a tool to collect domain data and identify a chain of permissions that allows a standard user account to escalate privileges to domain admin. They are using BloodHound, right? Nikto is a web server scanner. Trivy scans containers, right? And OpenVAS is a vulnerability scanner that can scan enterprise environments or like regular environments. So the only one that actually maps a path for you to escalate your privileges is BloodHound. I love that freaking tool. Like, I don't think I'm ever going to forget that tool and what it does. You are tasked with scanning a Docker image for known vulnerabilities in its installed packages and their dependencies. Use a tool that quickly reports CVEs and misconfigurations. I want to say Kube-Hunter does that, but it does technically Kubernetes clusters. So we're talking about Docker images. So that would most likely be Trivy. PowerSploit, we already know what it does, and it does credential dumping and PowerShell kind of scripting. And Nessus is a vulnerability scanner, and it does enterprise environment vulnerability scans, not necessarily Docker image vulnerability scans. So Trivy would be, yeah, very good. So while assessing a public GitHub repository, you discover that it contains hard-coded AWS keys. So that's a secret, right? That's like a secret scanner. You use a CLI-based tool designed specifically to find secrets like this. So GoBuster is an enumeration tool that can find us directories and subdomains. Wireshark is a network sniffer. Nikto is a web server scanner. And TruffleHog is the only one that I can think of that will scan for secrets. So yes, very good. Okay, great. During a web application assessment, you want to quickly enumerate common misconfigurations and outdated software running on a target web server. So there you go. You run a command line tool that scans for insecure HTTP headers, CGI scripts, and open directories. That's Nikto all the way. SQL map maps the SQL relational databases, so it's like an enumerator. OpenVAS scans for vulnerabilities inside of environments, but we're looking at, you run a command line tool. So Nikto is a command line tool that scans for those things. OpenVAS, I think, would actually also scan for these things, but it's mostly a GUI interface. Nikto is primarily a command line tool. And then Trivy does the scanning of the Docker images, right? So it would be Nikto that would do the scanning of the web server. Excellent. And the answer is kind of at the bottom, but you can see that this is highlighted over here. And okay, so that was it. That was it for section 3 or module 3 in total. And we did everything that had to do with vulnerability scanning and analyzing the results and the tools that would be used for vulnerability analysis and scanning. So we are going to move on to module 4 that has to do with exploitation. And module 4 is a monster. There are a lot of sections inside of module 4 because there are a lot of different types of exploits that can be run when we actually get into that. So we need to first talk about prioritizing and preparing our attacks so that we actually have a really good map for what we're going to be using for our attacks. And that's going to be everything that we're going to talk about in next week's episode for exploitation, the exploitation module. So hopefully you found some value out of this video and you got a chance to understand what it means to do vulnerability scanning, what all the different tools are that are available to you. And hopefully you also got some value out of these practice questions. To get access to this slideshow as well as the docs file that we use for the lecture, you're going to get instructions on how to join Hackaholics Anonymous in just a few seconds. And I will see you in the next episode, in next week's episode. So as always, love, peace, and chicken grease. If no one else loves you, Hank loves you. And I will see you in section 4.1 for prioritizing and preparing your attacks. Now, here's a quick message on how you can get the documents and the practice questions. To get the PenTest Plus notes, practice questions, and to join a supportive community of like-minded people like you, consider joining the Hackaholics Anonymous membership community. We have 4 tiers: the supporter, the agent, the guardian, and the master. And each tier gets their own Discord server and early access to content. The agent, guardian, and master levels will get exclusive content like line-by-line code explanations for how to create cybersecurity and PenTest Plus scripts, like exclusive downloads that they will get. For example, the notes document for this PenTest Plus and everything that I'm using for the lectures, as well as all of the practice questions and everything else that will go along that will be made for the scripts and everything else that we're going to be doing for the PenTest Plus training series. There will be free pre-made monthly Python automations that have to do with system administration, cybersecurity defense, as well as, of course, PenTest Plus and ethical hacking. And then there's going to be monthly live streams with me every single month, plus so many other things that you would get as a part of being a member of Hackaholics Anonymous in these tiers. To join, you can simply click the link in the description below, or you can go to our homepage and click the join button there, Or you can go to youtube.com/@hankhackshackers/join, and you'll be able to join Hackaholics Anonymous.